Welcome to a journey that begins high above the snowy peaks of Tibet, where secrets lie buried beneath layers of ice and mystery. Imagine this. You're soaring through the crisp mountain air, capturing breathtaking views of untouched wilderness, when suddenly something extraordinary comes into frame, something that doesn't belong. Two colossal glass domes nestled in remote craters, hidden from the world. Until now, what could they possibly be, and why are they there? Today's story will take us deep into forbidden territory, guided by curiosity and courage, as one man uncovers answers no one was ever meant to find. Stay with me. You won't want to miss what happens next. When professional drone pilot Ronnie is sent up into the mountains of Tibet to get some special footage, he never expected to find anything other than rocks and snow. But when he flies his drone over a forbidden area in the mountains, he captures these giant glass domes located in two mountain craters. Ronnie knows that there must be a very good reason for them being here. You won't believe what these domes are actually hiding. When Ronnie had managed to capture most of the footage he needed in the mountains, he decided to gear up his drone for the final shot. When Ronnie got the drone up high, he saw that in the crater of the mountaintops were two giant glass domes. With the last bit of battery left in the drone, Ronnie attempted to fly it closer to the domes to get a look of what was inside. Ronnie could barely believe his eyes when he finally got a look at what was hidden inside these mountains. This was big. He had to tell the world. But why? Why were these domes up here in the mountains? What were they covering? And why was Ronnie not allowed to film in this area? But before we start our story, smash the like button. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Ronnie has been flying drones professionally for over 10 years, but has been flying for fun for even longer. He works for movies, documentaries, and even sporting events. There have been so many good shots, but these will all be nothing compared to the discovery he is about to make. High up in the Tibetan mountains, Ronnie was used to going to some extreme locations to get footage, but going to the Tibetan mountains was a first for him. It would be a solo trip. He was told to get some footage of the mountaintops and snow that would be used in a documentary about wildlife and negative temperatures. But this wouldn't be easy. Although his drone was top-notch, state-of-the-art, Ronnie was still unsure about accepting the job. It would require a lot of work in a very difficult environment. It would be at an incredible height, and the cold would be below freezing. Would it be worth it to get these shots? There was only one way to find out. The only way to get to the filming area would be on foot. Climbing up through the snowy mountains of Tibet was not Ronnie's idea of fun, and he was ready to reject the job. It would be on foot, mostly alone, and on limited supplies. But money wasn't in the equation yet, and it could make him change his mind. And it certainly did. The company was prepared to offer him so much money for these shots that he simply couldn't say no, figuring that as long as he found a good guide up the mountain, he'd be okay. After all, it was just work. Being work, it was always difficult to get the perfect shot. This would just be a little more extreme. The first thing to do would be to find a guide, someone who would know the area well and could take him up the mountain on foot. This wouldn't be easy, though. Most likely he'd have to find someone local, and the people around here weren't nice to outsiders. It took him 2 days before he could get anyone to talk to him. With 2 whole days missing from his trip, Ronnie needed to hurry up and back down the mountain with the shots ready to send in order to deliver them on time. If he didn't get the footage sent within a week, the documentary would fall behind. That would mean a pay cut to Ronnie. Now that the local people were talking with him, Ronnie was able to hire 2 Sherpas to guide him up the mountain. The Sherpa people are nomadic and knew the mountainside well. Even with their knowledge, the trip was difficult and cold. Ronnie began to doubt if his equipment would even work in these conditions. The high wind was freezing and didn't let up for a day and a half, but with a bit of luck, Ronnie and his guides reached the filming location. The weather even began to let up, and Ronnie was beginning to get hopeful again. If he could just get these shots quickly, he'd be back down the mountain in no time. But things were about to change. Ronnie got to work preparing his drone. He talked with his guides and got some bad news. They knew the routes around here well because they were usually full of people. There were lots of flags along the routes and indicators of human life and interaction. This was exactly what Ronnie didn't want, given that this was a nature documentary. The mountains needed to be as free of human life as possible. It should look natural and clean. Having flags and possibly people in the shots wouldn't look good, and the company might not accept it. Luckily, Ronnie's guides had an idea that would change the entire trip. There was a portion of the mountains that was off limits to the Sherpa people as well as any other outsider. This meant that those parts of the mountains were mainly untouched and natural. It would be perfect for the documentary. But there was a slight problem that could mean serious trouble. Given that this portion of the mountain was off limits, it was also forbidden for planes and helicopters to fly over it. This would also include drones, or it would, but given that drones were so new, they hadn't been specified in any laws yet. Technically, it wouldn't be breaking the law, but it was still a risk. Despite the risk, Ronnie was going to go ahead with their plan. He'd done too much and had come so far not to try, especially since he'd spent so much time and money just to get here. He wasn't going to leave without getting what he came for, and it would be his stubbornness that would lead him to his discovery. Once they got to the edge of the restricted area, Ronnie set up his drone and lifted it into the air. His guides were fascinated with his drone and watched him as he moved it around in the sky. Ronnie talked to them and showed them how it worked, reminding himself as well. Ronnie, now fully ready to send the drone up, steered the drone in the direction of the mountaintops, which were fully restricted. The drone was out of sight in 15 minutes, but Ronnie could still see where he was going through the camera. It was time to start getting the footage that he came here for. Ronnie brought the drone around the mountaintops and set it up in different positions. He started recording as he went through the difficult shots. This would be filming the steep mountain sides and some close-ups of falling snow. What he saw on the camera was incredible, and it was going to get even more so. With the weather cooperating, Ronnie was able to get his most difficult shots. He then did some wide angles around the mountains, capturing different rocky points and snow mounds. He swooped the drone around and got shot after shot of snow, sky, and even sun, but this wasn't all he caught. There were some mountain goats living all the way up there, which resulted in some wonderful footage of wildlife in action. Unfortunately, those would be some of the last shots he'd get. The drone's battery was dying. It was time to wrap it up and get the drone back. Ronnie could only get one more shot. The final shot was going to be grand. Ronnie wanted to give a sweeping view of the mountains to show how big they really are and show the beauty as a whole. He turned the drone around and aimed, looking carefully through the camera. That's when he saw it, and his jaw dropped. While he only expected to see the mountaintops and clouds, Ronnie was given a completely different sight, something he never expected to see up here. At first, he thought he was seeing things, hallucinating in the high altitude, but that just couldn't be so. What did Ronnie see? It looked like two giant glass domes stuck in the craters of the mountains. But what would these glass domes be doing here? What was their purpose? And more importantly, who had put them here? Ronnie couldn't answer these questions, but maybe his guides could. After all, they knew the area and most things that happened here. After being stunned for nearly a whole minute, Ronnie came to his senses and called over his guides. He asked them to explain what he was looking at on the monitor, but they had no idea. They were just as clueless as Ronnie was, but he wasn't planning on staying clueless for long. Ronnie was more than curious and really wanted to take a closer look with his drone. Unfortunately, the alarm came to him that the battery was running out. If he didn't get his drone back to him now, he would never see it again. But the domes were right there. What choice did he have? A closer look or no? More drone. More than reluctant, Ronnie turned his drone toward him and flew it back, flying as fast as it could. The drone barely made it back to Ronnie before completely powering off. He was happy to have the drone back, but this didn't solve the mystery. There was definitely something strange up there, and he wanted to see it. Ronnie didn't waste any time packing up his equipment. He was going to go hiking up there. It was still far, far away, but he was more than determined. Even with his courage and curiosity, there was something stopping him, and it wasn't the distance. So what was stopping Ronnie, and would he get past it? The thing stopping Ronnie wasn't the weather or the distance, it was his guides. They insisted that this was forbidden territory and that no one should go into it. They didn't want to break the law and get into trouble. But Ronnie wasn't afraid of the law and was too curious to stay back. If he had to do this by himself, he would. After a long talk and some serious convincing, one of the guides agreed to go with him. He was curious too, especially after seeing the drone footage. The other guide wanted nothing to do with it and headed back down the mountain to the campsite. He wouldn't tell anyone, but he wouldn't go either. This left Ronnie with one guide and determination. Would it be enough? They crossed the border quickly into the forbidden territory. There wasn't a gate or fence to keep people out, simply a sign that said, "No trespassing, punishable by law." It was enough to keep the locals out, but not Ronnie. He had the spirit and the drive to do great things, and he was sure this was a great thing. Little did he know what was coming. Ronnie and his guide pressed on through the forbidden territory. Despite his exhaustion, the snow-covered path was eerily quiet. After an hour, they reached the mountain they'd seen in the video, climbing steeply. Ronnie felt the urgency of discovery. With his guide's help, they reached a plateau and saw the domes in the distance. The smaller dome, closer and easier to access, caught their attention. They hurried to it, and Ronnie brushed snow away from a large glass surface, revealing soil beneath. It was baffling. What was a field of soil doing on a mountaintop? His guide, meanwhile, discovered a door buried in snow. The door was locked with no visible means of entry until Ronnie spotted a battery-dead scanner. Ronnie used batteries from his drone to power the scanner. To their amazement, the scanner responded to Ronnie's face, unlocking the door. They entered a tunnel leading to another door, which opened to reveal a massive underground space beneath the dome. Inside, they found rooms stocked with supplies and a temperature-controlled environment, a stark contrast to the freezing mountain. Ronnie explored further and came across the soil field he'd glimpsed earlier. A sign on the wall written in the local language confirmed their suspicions. This was a presidential doomsday bunker. The supplies, secrecy, and infrastructure indicated it was designed for the elite government officials, celebrities, or the rich during a disaster. Realizing they had stumbled upon a tightly guarded secret, Ronnie felt the weight of their discovery. The presence of similar bunkers around the world for the privileged was unsurprising but disheartening. Knowing they shouldn't be there, the pair retraced their steps, restoring the door's lock and erasing their presence. Descending the mountain, Ronnie and his guide agreed to remain silent about what they had found. Any disclosure could endanger their lives. Ronnie deleted the footage of the domes from his drone and handed over the rest to his employer. He resolved never to let curiosity lead him into such perilous situations again.